Shalom, good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Real Israel podcast with me, your host, Chaim Malespin. I have the privilege to have a guest on today named Avi Melamed. He's the founder of the Middle East Institute. It's inside the Middle East. It's called ITME. He's an Israeli intelligence official and a senior official on Arab affairs. So we're dealing with a lot of different issues with this war, and we're going to have a lot of questions for him. So he spent a career inside the Israeli intelligence as a senior official, and he's an expert on the Middle East, which the West is not. And the West misses out so much information that he knows by heart. He's fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. He's nonpartisan. He's gifted at making a tangled region make sense in a nice, short, concise way. And he loves to speak to audiences that are both Christian and Jewish around the world. And so he's got a lot to say, I believe, about the U.S.-Iran war, the memorandum, and everything that's going on. So jump right in right now, and I'm going to ask him, beyond the headlines, your whole life, Avi, is really getting people to look deeper. And that's what this podcast, the Real Israel podcast, is for people to look deeper than the headlines into what's really going on. So when you look at the Middle East right now this week, what's the most important thing that you would say is going on behind the headlines that the Western media is usually missing or getting totally wrong?
Well, Chaim, good morning. Thank you for having me. Just a small correction. I'm a former Israeli intelligence official and senior official on Arab affairs. I quit my governmental positions many, many years ago, just to make it very
Okay.
clear. Regarding your question, I would say something like that. I think that the most important thing to look right now and in future ahead in the context of the Middle East is what we call the recalibrating of the Middle East, following everything that happened, particularly the last year, and of course, particularly in the context of the Iran-United States / Israel war. We are at a situation right now when we are trying to assess what is the reconfiguration of the geostrategic landscape of the region is going to look like. We have to be very cautious because there is a tendency, talking heads to start to speculate, and we are trying as much as possible to avoid speculations. So I would say that at this point, one of the things that we could say decisively is that we are witnessing recalibrating of the region with many potential trajectory down the road. And of course, we have to follow it very closely.
I know that when you watch the headlines in Arabic or you see what's being said in Arabic, knowing fluent Arabic, it's often a different picture than what is shown in the Western media or what's explained in the Western media. Like, for example, if only we would make a deal with them, then there'd be peace on earth and their wars would be over forever. That's what they say in the West, but a whole different scenario is being said in Arabic, right? And so would you say that this war is misinformation on steroids?
Well, regardless of the issue of the language, every war, every dramatic event has a lot of psychological warfare, disinformation, misinformation. It's not necessarily something that is typical to this current situation. We are all familiar with it. But you, Chaim, you brought a very significant point, and we should emphasize it, regardless of the issue of the war, and this is the issue of the language. Western discussion vis-a-vis the Middle East has some significant Achilles heel. That Western themselves are not really aware of that, but this is a great opportunity to bring it to the public attention. And that is the fact that overwhelmingly Western audience do not master the languages of the Middle East, and particularly Arabic, which is the most significant language.
Right.
The meaning of that is that the Western discussion is very much dependent upon two sources of providers of information. One are Western mediators of knowledge, like TV stations, like news, like bloggers, like intellectuals, like professors, and so on and so on. Most of the cases, the Western providers of knowledge about the Middle East, they themselves don't speak the languages of the Middle East. The meaning of that is that the Western audience is received, maybe in the best case scenario, a very partial picture of the reality. The second provider of the information are people who are fluent in the language of the Middle East. And then there is a major challenge because some of those people, obviously not all of them, but some of those people have political agenda, and accordingly they are crafting their messages to the Western audience because they know that the Western audience actually has no ability to verify or to criticize or to question the information that are being provided with. Why is it so significant? It is so significant because in the end of the day, the Western public discussion, the Western intellectual discussion and media discussion vis-a-vis the Middle East is to a large extent shaped by that fact And the bottom line of that is that in the best case scenario, the discussion in the Western circles vis-a-vis the Middle East generally, and particularly in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that discussion at the best case scenario can present only a very partial picture of a much bigger picture of reality.
Indeed, for sure. So that's so true. And knowing that this war is not over, it's been going on since February, early this year. Iran has been locked in war that supposedly now cooled just to negotiation phase, but every second it feels like something's changing. So would you say that they, from your intelligence understanding, that they are contained, that Iran is contained? Because everyone's saying something different. They're saying, no, of course they're not nearly defeated. In fact, they defeated America, say. Would you say that they're contained, the threat is contained, or that we're just in the eye of the storm for the next huge outbreak of war with Iran?
Well, Chaim, there are many layers to these questions, and let me very shortly try to briefly address each and every one of them. Starting with the fact, when the war started in February 28th, I was in the States, in North America, for a long lecture tour. And right there, I was, of course, making the most up-to-date briefing in my lectures, talking about the war. And right there from the beginning, I actually described that war as what I call the poker game. And I analyzed each side and the cards that each side has in its possession. And my estimation, which is still valid and has been proven to be accurate, was that in the end of the day, the Iranian masters and excel in exploiting their cards in the context of the war. The Iranian identify a couple of pressure cards, and they are excelling in very effectively using those cards. So this is one level of the picture. There is another level that you hinted to that has to be maybe further understood, and that has to do with the issue of perceptions of victory and defeat in the Middle East terminology. This is a very fascinating issue. The bottom line is that when you look at the terminology in the Middle East, either in the context of the war or in the context of Israel-Hamas collision or in the context of Israel-Hezbollah collision, the Houthis and the Saudis, time and again you see the same phenomenon. Defeat and triumph are being presented very differently by the sides according to the way they would like to choose to look at reality. Now, this is something very significant because in the end of the day, to a large extent, that perspective plays very significant role in their policy making. In other words, when you look at the story of the Iranian regime views itself as the victorious one, regardless of the objective the realities on the ground. And the fact that the Iranian regime views itself as such is also part of the large scheme of things. And that is one of the explanations to the fact that the Iranian regime, as of now, is still pushing the envelope. It's still operating under the impression and the conviction that it has enough space to breathe and enough space to maneuver. Hence, the policy that we see that the Iranian regime have been applying, and the tactic it has been applying, particularly in the last couple of months. As far as the Iranian regime is concerned, they can continue knowing that the situation, as far as they are concerned, objectively is quite worrisome, but at the same time, they feel that they can still play and push the envelope because, among other things, it is being shaped by this perspective of triumph and defeat. This is something that is significant in the context of the gap of understanding between Western discussion and Middle Eastern terminology and Middle Eastern inner mindset, inner psyche, and inner language.
I think you're so right that even the West doesn't really know what victory looks like. You said victory or defeat, triumph or defeat. I don't even know if the West knows what we feel triumph would look like. And I think without a very clear definition, does that mean changing the regime? I think some people, like for sure in Israel, think that that would be a very important goal. Others say as long as the ballistic missiles are gone and the production, then that's a good enough, as long as the nuclear threat is gone. But if we just don't have a very clear definition of what triumph is, and also, I know the West likes to think, well, living in coexistence, they can do their life, we can do our life, we can hopefully do business together, and mutual respect. That is a goal generally, it seems, for the West, but it's certainly not their goal. What does triumph look like for them? To have all their proxies, obliterating the West. So these, I think, are very helpful, clear definitions that we just don't seem to have, even in the West. So I want to jump to Gaza quickly and just talk about this Gaza deal and the International Stabilization Force and everything that's about to happen there, talk of them disarming. So there's this fresh round of ceasefire talks. I know that Israel doesn't seem to believe that they are really going to do what they say, because of the history. But there's some hope, and hope is seeming to arise that they'll give up weapons. Some people hope for that. And that what would that look like with this international stabilization force? They've said they're going to disband their governing coalition, Hamas's governing coalition. So in all honesty, in your opinion, are we seeing something that could really bring a new Gaza and security, or is it just another lie?
Well, Chaim, again, you are making a great question. And again, it has many layers to refer to. I think we need to bring those layers into the discussion. Let me start with the first layer. Hamas is not going to disappear. I know there has been people, either from political perspective, ideological, or whatever, wishful thinking, thought that Hamas is going to disappear. Hamas is not going to disappear. It's part and parcel of the Palestinian people. And this is enormously significant. Shortly, I will explain why exactly it's so significant. The other thing is that talking about the disarmament of Hamas, here is the things as Hamas views. Hamas DNA is the whole concept that is known by the name of al-Muqawama or resistance, was known in the West as the resistance. And actually, we are looking at a movement that has a very radical ideology that is being translated to a very extreme proactive, aggressive expansion mindset, which of course include, among other things, the obliteration of the state of Israel. This is Hamas DNA. The weapon in the minds of Hamas is part and parcel of its whole entity. In other words, Hamas, without the weapon, is losing its right to exist, according to Hamas perspective. So right there, you get an answer regarding the whole issue of the disarmament. The same, by the way, goes with the Hezbollah. Now, there is another layer when we talk about the story of Gaza Strip specifically, but if you want to expand it, we could talk about the Palestinian generally. And this is another layer that we have to look at. Given to what I said right now, meaning that Hamas is part and parcel of the Palestinian people, that the weapon, as far as Hamas is concerned, is an integral part of Hamas. And given the fact that there is an enormous criticism on Hamas within the Palestinians as well as in the Arab world, this is a point that has to be emphasized for Western audience. There is an enormous criticism and anger with Hamas among the Palestinians and in the Arab world for two major reasons. One is the destruction that Hamas inflicted upon Gaza since it took control over Gaza in 2007. And the other reason is that Hamas is an ally of the Iranian regime. These are two things that fuel an enormous anger, frustration, and criticism in the Arab world. Taking into consideration all those things, and now zooming back into the inner Palestinian arena, including Gaza and including the West Bank, this is what we have to look at. And this is the most significant thing that goes beyond the headlines and beyond the politics. We have to look whether there is going to be an evolving inner Palestinian discussion that in the end of the day centers around one major core value or one major core issue. Are the Palestinians going to continue to stick to the concept of the resistance Hamas style, meaning the concept that says the weapon is part and parcel of us and using this weapon is part and parcel of our ID, or are the Palestinians going to depart that? We are looking at a very complex process. We are looking at not a short-term process. We are looking at a convoluting turning points and road ahead. But this is what we have to follow. This is the inner discussion within the Palestinians that we have to follow. So when we try to evaluate, is it a lie or not a lie? Is it going to be materialized on the ground or not materialized on the ground? We are looking in a very, I would say, narrow lenses. We have to expand the lenses and look through these lenses. Again, I'm bringing in the Palestinian perspective because that's my job. My job is not to tell the Western audience what they can read at the media headline. My job is to try to reflect to them the inner perspectives from an intelligence perspective, now talking about the way Hamas and the Palestinians and the Arab world are looking at the whole story of Gaza Strip. So when we look at the story of Gaza Strip, these are the components that we have to look at very carefully.
I think that having seen personally the handwritten letter, good handwriting, by the way, good handwriting in Arabic of Sinwar, the way he wrote and even quoted the Quran, and says, it'll say in the future, there's a Jew hiding under this tree. There's a Jew hiding under this rock. Kill him. This is the interpretations, extremist interpretations that they follow. And so I just think that until their idolization of these ideologies and these leaders and their Al-Shabiba youth camp, which trains the generations, and every other mass murderer, they name a youth camp after the next mass murderer, whoever killed the most innocent people, and they call it a resistance and all this. I think my opinion is, until their education system won't shift, you won't have a chance to see something new for generations to come, is my thought. But I want to end on hope, because our anthem here in Israel is Tikva, which is Hatikva, is the hope in English, the hope. So hope for this region. Where do you think there's listeners that pray for Israel that are watching this. There's Christians, there's Jews, there's lovers of Israel who pray for Israel. For millions of people who care about the future of the whole Middle East, the whole thing, not just Israel, what do you want them to understand with clear eyes of hope, not just despair, eyes of despair? Where can there be hope, in your opinion?
Well, Chaim, you said something very correct, talking about hope for the region, the whole region, not only Israel.
Yes.
And I share it. I want hope for Israel. I want hope for Palestinians. I want hope for all the region. And this goes back to when I'm saying I'm referring to my institute inside the Middle East, ITME, core value. We are basically saying, look, if you want to understand Israel, if you want to understand the Palestinians, if you want to understand the story of the conflict, you must understand the Middle East, because the Middle East, in the end of the day, shapes the trajectory of Israel, it shapes the trajectory of the Palestinians, it shapes the trajectory of the region at whole. When I'm looking at whole the region, and you are talking about perspective of hope, yes, I can see things that could potentially be today already are seeds for hope. Like, for example, an inner discussion within the Arab world. Again, this is what I'm doing professionally. I'm very intimately involved in this world for many, many years of my life, because I'm very familiar with the language, the materials, the mentality, the tradition, and so on and so on. And there is a lot of discussions going on within the region regarding issues of statehood sovereignty, regarding the issue of the need to basically ensure that the state and only the state will be the one that control weapons and peace and war decisions. These are very significant developments that we see in the context of the Palestinians. We see that in the context of the Lebanese. We see that in the context of the Iraqis. So this is one aspect. There is another aspect which I think is very significant, and that is the clearing and growing understanding in the region with all the things that happened, that in the end of the day, you are looking at a region that has to be walking to the beat of the strategic interest. And you see more and more that commentators in the region, people in the region, politicians in the region are emphasizing that point. Why is it so significant? Because once you're looking at reality and the trajectory ahead through the lenses of what are my long-term strategic interests, then you are looking at a process that in its essence is a positive one. It's constructive one. And one of the ramifications of that is in the context of Israel. Namely, today, there is clear sense in the region, with all the challenges that Israel is going through, there is a clear sense in the region that says, look, Israel has some very significant assets, and Israel, in the end of the day, is a player that we, for our own strategic long-term interest, should be allied for. So when you look at all those things together, yes, you can see the seeds of things that could fruit into a hopeful trajectory down the road. That being said, we need to be at the same time very realistic. We need to be at the same time very aware of the challenges of the inner power struggle in the region between statehood sovereignty and between semi-state entities, between radical ideologies and pragmatism, between a narrow-minded outlook, which is very active and aggressive, and between the need to look at the long-term strategic interest. All those things have to be viewed very closely. And I want to add one last thing in the context of the region and the Western discussion, because Western discussion about the Middle East is an integral part of the issue of the hope. And the Western discussion about the Middle East must be one that will contribute to the hope and not will do the opposite. today, unfortunately, because some segments of the discussions in the West are very much narrow and very partial and very inaccurate in context of reflecting the region. Unfortunately, today I say that some trends or currents within the Western public and media and intellectual discussion regarding the Middle East generally and particularly regarding Israel and the Palestinian and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, those aspects, though they may think that they are coming from a place that offering a hope, unfortunately, they are doing exactly just the opposite. And I'll give you a small example. Everyone is aware of the concept of resistance that became very common in the campuses in the North America. It's being affiliated with identifying with Palestinians, with supporting Palestinians, and so on and so on. This is legitimate. The issue here is that those who are chanting resistance in campuses or in media should be aware of the fact that while they are romanticizing that term, people of the Middle East knows that resistance basically means destruction and death and block a path ahead, including, by the way, Palestinians. So that's the reason why I'm saying Western discussion about the Middle East must be exposed to a professional discussion about the Middle East, so it could play a constructive, contributing, positive role in the context of hope for Israel, for Palestinians, and for the region.
You know, as we wrap up, when October 7th massacre happened, it was so tragic. I remember though thinking, wow, now the West can see through the mask. They can see what we're dealing with. They can see what the real intentions of Hamas are. Not the smokescreen, not the lies upon lies. And still, it didn't do the full result that I thought, where everyone would say, remove Hamas immediately. There's some people that actually start cheering them on and start to fill the London Bridge with protesters against Israel. But I know that even through it all, something is moving, something is shifting, something is cracking there. The drama at the Strait of Hormuz, with the rattled energy markets, with all these agreements that are being what is it called? These fake ceasefires. People are getting wise to the fact of what we're actually dealing with and what their intention is. And I think they can make a more educated choice as to, do they want an October 7th in their country or not? If they want an October 7th to happen in their country, then tfaddal, welcome that. If not, then don't welcome that. So I think that's my hope, is that people are more and more going to see the reality in light of everything we've been through. And so I'm hoping for a better tomorrow. Any last thoughts? How can we find you? How can people watching you find you? What website do they go to?
Well, of course, they can go to our website. It's called Inside the Middle East. Our institute provides a lot of educational, professional, apolitical knowledge about the Middle East. And by the way, this is a great opportunity to mention our unique fellowship for students and undergraduate under the age of 30 in North America and elsewhere to apply for the fellowship. This is a fellowship called a view from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a view from the region. This is a fellowship that teach about how the Middle East impact the trajectory of the conflict. This is a fellowship that teach and practice critical thinking and media literacy based upon operational intelligence skills and tools. This is a fellowship that provides participants with skills and tools to become what we call ambassadors of change. It's a very demanding program, but it's a great one. And if somebody wants to apply, this is the right time to do that. Go to our website, Inside the Middle East by ITME, and you could see all the information there regarding the application process. Once again, undergraduate under the age of 30, and also high achiever from high schools, senior high schools are also welcome to apply. Great opportunity. Registration is done by the end of this month, this August.
Thank you so much for all that you teach, or in Hebrew, Melamed. Your last name is Melamed. That is teach, and you do a great job, Avi Melamed. And how do you say it? Melamed?
Melamed or Melamed, it's the same.
Melamed, it's teaching. It's all teaching. Thank you. And hey, we're going to believe for better days coming soon, where the Middle East will have a new day dawn upon it. Thank you so very much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me, Chaim. Bye-bye. Take care.
Of course. Come again soon.